Well, since I said that I needed to talk about the Hikite before I talked about the Nigiri Gami, and I talked about the Hikite last week, this is the Nigiri Gami. The Nigiri Gami, or gripping jar, is a traditional tool used in karate as well as many forms of Chinese martial arts to train the grip. As I said, in the traditional karate context, you're using this to train the Hikite. So you're building up grip strength so that when you reach out and grab, it's harder for them to pull their hand out, thus necessitating the downward block drill that I talked about. This particular nigirigami is a flower pot filled with concrete. Modern building material, traditionally they'd be filled with stones or other heavy items. The trick on training it is that you're not just grabbing the lip and holding. You are pinching between the fingers. The palm is well separated. You're not hooking at the lip. You're squeezing with the fingers and supporting the weight primarily with the fingers. And yes, that really changes the way that your arm has to engage in order to bear that weight when it's just by the fingers. If I hold it just underneath the lip, my elbow can drop. If I hold it by the fingers, my elbow naturally comes up in order to sustain the weight. And so that's a good way of telling if you're doing it right. If you can hold it relatively easily with your elbow down, you're not really gaining that strength because you're just supporting it via the lip. If you pinch it by the fingers, that necessitates the use of larger muscle groups because it doesn't have that structure holding it up. And I think that's an important point. Depending on your previous amount of conditioning, your style, your lineage, and your teacher, they may say, start with that. Start with something easy so that you can get it up and, just have a confidence builder. There's nothing wrong with that. But the end goal is that you want to focus on the fingertips and build that grip strength. Now, there are equivalencies in the Chinese style, specifically what they call eagle claw arts or dragon claw arts. Either way, it's the 38th of the 72 consummate Shaolin skills, and it's still just grip building, though depending on your system, it kind of varies. But still, it's to build up grip. The jar in the traditional karate context is a little more versatile. You don't see it just in terms of training the grip. You also see it in terms of training extensions while training the grip or building structure for pulling in so that when you punch out in a reverse punch and you have that nice structure between the shoulders and the fist, you then can pull in while maintaining that structure. So you're holding it by the grip and bringing it out into that structure and then pulling it back. So however you want to train with it, I think that those are a few interesting methods. I'll do a few examples. My personal favorite, which I'll probably start out with, is you grip the jar and you hold it behind the back around hip level. Now this does engage the pectoral muscles a little, and you're supposed to walk. Traditionally, it's in these circle stepping movements that you see in higher levels like the Hongetsu kata or the Senshin kata. But the end result is that when you turn, you're supposed to turn in the hara. And I personally feel it a lot doing this drill, more so internally than even in my wrists. So I think that that's something that I'll explain a bit more when I do the demonstration, but this is a very traditional method of training, and I think it's very important. This one is really personal to me because this is one of the first methods of Hojo Undo I ever came across. I came across it in Shotokan, and Shotokan doesn't normally use training methods like this. This is much more common in Goju Ryu or even Shorin Ryu, but Shotokan does use it because I think all forms of Okinawan karate use these training tools at one point or another. It really just depended on the lineage. Because Funakoshi didn't use these methods as much, it isn't as prevalent in Shotokan. Doesn't mean he never used it, doesn't mean he didn't know it. In fact, I'm almost sure that he did both know and use them. He just didn't emphasize them in his school. And that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine. I'd say that's a matter of lineage. I like it. So in my lineage of Shotokan, I do teach it whenever possible. And since I have these new training tools, I can do it a little more authentically. But I wanted to talk about these before getting into the drills themselves because it's interesting. It's a nice little connection between the Chinese and Okinawans, and I just really like this training method. So I will show you some of the traditional methods that I learned next time. Until then, keep your teacups empty. I can't drink this.